Evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to tonight's FII Awareness Week event. I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined tonight by Janet Willicot, who I will tell you all about just shortly. Hi, Janet, how's it going?
Fine, thanking you, Kelly. So nice to be with you tonight.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this all week, no joke. I'm thrilled to be here. It's such a privilege to talk to you about such an important issue. But what we'll do is we'll just give it 5 minutes or so, let everyone join us on our Facebook page. I know our sunshine elves in the background are furiously reminding everybody that we're on tonight, so hopefully we'll have lots of people join us. It's been a really amazing week. Like the level of engagement has just been incredible. Awareness has just, it's so important to spread this message of awareness of FII and everything behind it to as many people as possible. And I can see on our Facebook page now, we're getting lots of people logging in. Hello, everybody. Do let us know in the chat, as always, where you are watching from. It would be lovely to say hello to you all. Hi, I'm having my usual Facebook gremlins in that I can't necessarily see everyone's comments yet, but I will try and get to you. And of course, my cat's joined us now as well. So, Janet, you have some cats as well, don't you?
Yes, always good to have a cat in the background. It reduces anxiety. She's lovely.
Oh,
I mean, cats on Facebook Live. Well, it's always good to have a cat.
It certainly is. So hello everyone in the chat. Hi. Hello, Kathy Long. Hi, Kathy Long. Nice of you to come along tonight. Kathy is one of our associate social workers and of course has a huge interest in FII, as you will hopefully all know this week. We'll be talking about Kathy's work during the course of the evening. We've got a question, can we watch this anywhere after it's finished? Yes, you absolutely can watch it after it's finished. It's on our Facebook page. So all you will need to do after the Facebook Live is just log on and you'll be able to watch it afterwards. So hello everybody, hello Amanda from Somerset, hi, nice to see you. Hello from Abby in Aylesbury. Lovely to see so many people logging in. It's just great. Do keep them coming. Let us know where you're watching from, and have let us know your personal stories as well, because that's very important. We love to hear about your personal experiences within this whole world of FII. One thing I've really learned this week is just how much it affects so many families. Before I worked at Sunshine, I wasn't aware of FII, and I've been a teacher, I've been an educationalist for 17 years, and it's not something I've ever encountered. Other forms, we'll talk about Munchausen's by proxy, I'm sure, tonight, but FII itself, it's not something that I knew about until Sunshine. And then this week has really brought it home to me how prevalent and such a difficult issue it really is. So it's lovely. Oh wow, we've got someone from Australia watching. Hi Nolene from Brisbane, Australia. Wow, that's amazing.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, welcome Australia.
Yeah, that is amazing. And how many people have we got on now? We've got 64 watchers, so I'll give it 1 more minute and then I'll introduce Janet and we'll get going with our main topic of conversation. Do pop in the chat if you have any particular questions that you'd like Janet to address this evening. We've got quite a packed programme for tonight's Facebook Live between now and 9 o'clock. So we will do our best to get to questions. It may be that we've already planned to answer them, but certainly if you do have anything specific, please don't be afraid to pop it into the chat. We are all so friendly here and like one big sunshine family. I know it sounds incredibly cheesy, but it is true. You are coming to a place of great support, understanding and empathy. So feel free to share, feel free to ask, no judgment, I can't emphasize that anymore. Without further ado, then I think we should get cracking on the main topic of the night. So we have several things we're going to be discussing tonight. FII, of course, and why it happens, and we'll be talking in detail about the FII medical model through this evening, and Janet will tell you all about what that is, and why it is such an important thing to understand within the world of FII. We will be talking as well about the impact on education and health. We'll be touching on today's guidance, which was released by the British Association of Social Workers. So hi, special mention to Kathy in the chat. The launch was today. Kathy and Fiona's amazing piece of work that we did a Facebook Live on a few weeks ago. We'll be talking about that. And then I suppose almost like the main point of why we're doing this whole entire week is what happens next and how we stop this injustice that so many families are experiencing. So Janet is, well, it's a complete privilege to have you here, Janet. I've never known somebody to be so incredibly qualified in loads of different areas. I was reading all of your background and your experience, and gosh, it's just an absolute privilege. So for those of you who don't know who Janet is, Janet Willicot is an independent public health expert within the world of SEND. She's an educational legal representative and researcher. She's currently undertaking her PhD, which started in 2019. And I'm sure she'll talk about it, but her thesis is enabling her to write new legislation for the Department of Education for the British government, which is incredibly exciting. Janet's also a fellow of the Royal Society of Public Health, a fellow of the British Institute of Innkeeping. Oh, I could talk about that alone for half an hour with you, Janet. Yeah, she's just super qualified and knowledgeable about the world of FII. So Janet, welcome. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kelly. It's lovely to be here, and thank you for inviting me to discuss or talk about this very pertinent subject that impacts so many SEND parents, mothers, fathers, carers, guardians, etc. And I came to look at FII in great detail since 2011. And I have to tell your viewers tonight that I'm not just a professional, I am a mother, and I also have a child. Well, he's a young person now, he's almost 19, and my child has a rare disease. And so my own legal battles within the world of SEND began roughly about 16 years ago. And I stuck to my guns and I did my research, and I looked at health in the general framework, and I eventually got my son his provision and healthcare and social care that he needed. But it took a very, very, very long time. And most of my understanding came from professionals who had a lack of knowledge. And so after the incredible legal battle myself, I then have put together a whole plethora of information, research to help those professionals to understand. And most generally, my area is public health. A lot of people do not understand what public health is, or what it means to be healthy in the sense of legalities. And I bang on about the health principles of 1946 over and over and over again. What is it? What does it mean to be healthy? It basically means that there are 9 principles that our government has to ensure, that it has to fulfill. And most of them would be, or it includes that you have a right to a house, you have a right to accommodation, you have a right to food and water, you have a right to love who you want to love, you have a right to effective and constructive education. Health, of course, medical health, clinical health, psychological health, therapeutic health, psychiatric health. Not just one element of health, You have a right to love who you want to love. You have a right to religious education, etc., etc. And that's what it means to be healthy. And we only need one element of health to be out of sync for the whole card or stack of cards to come crumbling down. And it's pretty much linking what Professor Luke Clement said in your previous webinar, and that clustered injustice. Clustered injustice basically means health or public health, because often send parents, all those who are alleged to have FII, in particular today's program, that somewhere or some element of their public health hasn't been addressed. Could it be that they're housing or they are lacking housing? Is it that they have to move? Educational provision? Their disabilities are not being centered or cared for in the terms of medical, clinical, therapeutic. We all know what's happening currently in the NHS construct. Is there domestic violence? What about LGBTQ plus communities being ousted or not cared for or sent? All of that is one clustered injustice, which actually is public health. And that is my entire research model. It's looking at the health of the nation, which includes education and health, or medical health, educational health. And so that is my perspective, and that's where my expertise lie. And I look at all of that together. That's what I do.
Janet, that's fascinating. I've always wondered how to define public health in that way, and that has just really helped. And that's a way of describing it I think I will use with some of the families I work with who may ask. So thank you for that. So you've been researching FII for over 11 years now, which is, a substantial amount of time. You touched on some issues there that, societal issues, but what would you say is the main contributing factor to the increase of FII allegations over the last few years?
Looking at health and the clustered injustice, or the whole public health model, I've then come to look at the increase in FII, or why that's come about, or why it's become so pertinent on everybody's checklist in terms of social workers, social care intervention, educationalists. Cast your mind back to maybe 30 years ago, 20 years ago. The increase in awareness of health pre-Google or pre the internet was middling. People would go off to your library or scroll through the encyclopedias, quite laborious. But now we have the internet. Here it is. We can log on and find out and have the knowledge immediately. With that, we've also had the increase or awareness in scientific understanding, in particular DNA, the understanding of genetics or the human genome. And then that leads to exponential understanding of rare diseases or complex or perplexing health issues, often related to genetic dispositions. We only need to be reminded of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, ADHD, EDS, ASD, PANDAS, and or any other rare diseases or diseases without a name, SWAN syndromes, etc., etc. So we have an understanding now that there are, with all the science technology, we can research more. So that genetic or scientific analysis of the human body enables humans to understand health. However, education, judiciary, and the health models are still very much basic. It hasn't caught up to the science, and that's where it is lacking. And if we took the basic health, judicial and educational models and married them to the rise in scientific understanding, then maybe, just maybe, we wouldn't have the need for increasing FII, because the awareness would be there.
That makes a lot of sense. We've got some really good questions along this topic in our chat. We have somebody asking about race disparities. They're vast within Black people's healthcare. Have you encountered anything like that within your research?
Absolutely. Again, that falls into public health, and as Luke said, clustered injustice. And we need to look at the stop and search model, which I absolutely do not agree with at all, because that forms part of public health as well. Are ethnic minorities targeted? And in my knowledge and research findings, yes, they are.
Gosh.
Because it is assumed or presumed that ethnic minority citizens do not understand, or they have a lack of understanding. And I can categorically say that I have 3 clients within the ethnic minority background or category, as people would like to say. And I can honestly say that they are more qualified than I am, and they are targeted.
Gosh, I mean, there's just no words, really, is there?
It is sad.
Clustered injustice. It's layer upon layer of injustice. That there seems to be very little way out for families. We have a few people in the chat asking for the BASW guidance. I've got my Sunshine Elves in the background, checking whether it's publicly available yet, and if it is, they'll pop a link in the chat. Also had somebody ask what my cat's called. She's called Tilly. So anyone wanting to know that. So we've got some really shocking stories as well. An autistic parent will harm an autistic child instead of understand their needs better. What an illogical concept that is. Completely agree. It's just terrible. I was told by the safeguarding social worker that they're trained to come in and presume. The social worker learned very quickly this wasn't the correct path, and FII was not the reason for the anxiety and challenging behaviour, and then helped us get a diagnosis. Well, that's sort of got a happy ending to that story, but I know many families don't have, that experience, do they, Janet?
Well, I absolutely, and which leads me on to I've made a whole lot of notes, so I need to refer to my notes. Is that a lot of health professionals are trained to observe, and upon that observation, they go away and write down their findings and their views based on observations. In my experience, in my research, and having observed social workers who just walk in and have a view and write that view down, or often they will come in, have a walk around, go out, go back to the office and write their views. Now, we can challenge that in the sense of, did they really observe something? Or did they just go back and have their own lived experience or own view? If you are a social worker, for example, and when I refer to social workers, I'm not saying all social workers are bad. I'm not. There are a few who don't follow the process or protocols, but if you are given a sheet of paper or a guidance to follow, I'm not talking about the new guidance, you read that guidance, you automatically, by your human disposition, will have a bias. You're walking into somebody's home and you are seeing that home through your lived experience or your understanding of your own living. You can't help that. You are human. You can't stop that from happening. Where you define yourself is that you leave that bias away to the side and you observe and you ask detailed, constructive questioning. Understand the parent, but it's also more important. And in relation to, there was that question about autistic parents harming their autistic children. Is it not that it's the language that's caused the barrier? And maybe social workers need to look at how they address parents and not automatically assume upon their bias or own lived experience. Because when you change the language, you'll get a better answer.
Completely agree. And I mean, this week, our hashtag all this week has been quit the blame game, because this week is not about blaming. It's not about blaming families or parents for, you know, trying to seek the best for their children. It's not about blaming professionals for, you know, expressing genuine safeguarding concerns, because that's so important. So we've very, very much made that clear this week, that it's not a blame game. But what is the importance of identifying where these issues are coming from? And you've sort of touched on that by talking about, you know, our intrinsic application of our own experience to situations we encounter. Is there anything else there where it comes to identifying where these FII issues, you know, come from?
Well, I first, when I have clients or when people come to me and ask me for support, I first sit down with them face to face, if not via Zoom, and I often say to them, tell me what it is that you want. And it's very difficult for somebody to go, actually, this is what I want, because often we don't really know what we want, or we do, but we can't articulate it. Or what does your child want, or what is your child experiencing? And often it's the language barrier or not enough words to describe something. And we as humans, as mothers or fathers, instinctively know when something's wrong.
Yeah.
We know this because we are a species living on this planet, hardwired to survive. We pick up those subtle micro nuances where social workers don't. We know that something's happening. And when we go to a doctor or we go to a GP or a specialist or a pediatrician and we explain something, the language, again, is not corrective. But why is a parent to know that? They just going, something's not quite right. And so looking at the language or miscommunication or misunderstanding, if the words aren't used correctly or the words aren't perceived correctly, that is an automatic trigger for a GP or a pediatrician. It's looking at what those professionals are trained to do. So we come back, and so as I always explain to parents and professionals, we've got a piece of string. Let's take this pen as a piece of string. Most often, FII accusations or difficulties in send or processes reach to the middle. Often parents or professionals go, there's a problem, help, 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 or there's a problem, let's remove the child. Well, let's go to court, or let's have this conference, or this child protection issue, or this meeting, or etc. Everybody wants to go from the middle to the end to get to the resolve. As a forensic public health specialist now, we have to look at how or why that came to be. I'm not interested in the resolve because there's always going to be a resolve. What happened to the beginning? How did that beginning come to be? Who, what, when, how? All those questions. And I need to come back to the basis of FII and where that came from. And I think it's important that professionals and parents understand it, because it doesn't just go back to Roy Meadows, and it doesn't just go to other health professionals within the FII world who keep pushing for FII to be acknowledged. It goes further than that. And I'm going to read from my notes, and I want parents to understand, I want professionals to understand, is that where does Munchausen's come from? Because we need to understand FII, fictitious disorder. Does it exist? Does it really exist? Has anybody challenged that, apart from Dr. Fiona and Kathy Long? And so we have to look at the origins or etymology of the wording or the construct of this Munchausen's and who invented it. It was coined by a Dr. Richard Allen John Usher all the way back in 1969, or sorry, no, in 1951. And he took this construct of Munchausen's and looked at it saying, well, actually, this person is harming themselves, etc., etc. Now, were they really harming themselves? Were they really looking for attention? Or was it way back in the 1950s that somebody was presenting with a complex, rare disease that wasn't really looked at? So this whole notion of Munchausen has come to be because a doctor, and I kid you not, in endocrine specialisms or hormonal specialisms, then deemed somebody through his research as having then this Munchausen's issue or difficulty or presentation. I'm not saying Munchausen's or Munchausen's by proxy or FII doesn't exist. It does. I know of parents who have done harm to their children. But we have to look at the reasonings of it. Did they do it intentionally? Were they trying to garner some other aspect because they were lacking in other areas of their life? Or is it that we really have to go all the way back to challenge Munchausen's and then challenge Dr. Meadows' notion of Munchausen's by proxy? And then, of course, challenging the whole FII or fictitious disorder. We have to go all the way back and challenge the whole lot to remedy the FII model or medical model.
I have to share with you something I've just read in the chat regarding Munchausen syndrome by proxy. This is really, really quite upsetting. So I apologise to anyone who finds this really difficult, but I think it's really important that we share it. Good evening. I've been accused of Munchausen syndrome by proxy and emotional abuse. We're left with PTSD now. My daughters are 17 and 22. Because we're hesitant to go to the doctors and make a fuss, my daughter has had a lump in her neck for a year, and it turns out it's thyroid cancer. I'm so sorry, Caroline, the fact that you've been put through what you've been put through to arrive at that having happened as a direct result. It's just unforgivable. And this need to challenge that Janet is describing is the key, I feel. And it's difficult, isn't it, to challenge something that has been so accepted. But if you look through history, all the way back to the very early days of things like when people were accused of witchcraft, for example, as a means of explaining certain things. At the time, that was what was accepted was going on. And of course, move on to, the 50s and the 60s, and Munchausen syndrome by proxy was accepted, that was going on. And now we're in this world of FII that is linked very much to that. But really, unless we challenge that has gone before, we can't make a new detailed understanding of what's going on in the world now, can we really? I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. You mentioned Roy Meadows there as well, and you may want to explain to those who don't know who Roy Meadows is, but essentially he's linked to the FII model because the FII medical model was based on the work of Roy Meadows, who's now been discredited. He's a paediatrician. Is this FII medical model at the root of the problem then? That whole, it's existed for this period of time and therefore it must be fact and real. Is it the root of the issue here?
I think, first of all, Kelly, I want to say to your viewer, and I'm absolutely devastated that this lady's daughter has now suffered the consequences and trauma of FII and has been presumably too scared to go and seek intervention because of that continuous label that continues to hang over families. And so, I will gladly reach out to that family and support them if they need some help in terms of addressing or challenging that process. But coming back to your question and Roy Meadows, and I have to, for legality's sake, is that Professor Roy Meadows was linked to the baby shaking syndrome, where many, many years ago, there was a really super highly qualified solicitor who was accused pretty much of FII or shaking her baby to death. Eventually, all the clarity came out in court. It was a rare disease, but Roy Meadows, through his whole process or understanding and applying the whole Munchausen's criteria, invented Munchausen's by proxy. But nobody challenged him until it was too late. He was discredited. He was kicked out of the General Medical Council, but then subsequently reinstated. So I just need to make that very clear. Has he gone on to impact the construct of FII? Absolutely. All his material and research material has laid bare the bones and the threshold and the criteria for FII, but nobody has unpicked that. And nobody has challenged it all the way back to the basics, right back to the 1950s. And that's where we need to start. And so looking at the construct of FII now and what Kathy Long's done, what Dr. Fiona Gullen-Scott has done, is rewrite some new guidance for social workers, basically giving them some understanding or knowledge. So the naivety or the ignorance is being displaced by knowledge or an underpinning of what it could be or what it may be. Together with the new guidance, the rest or the dated history needs to be challenged. Then and only then can we hold the system or the guidance to account to rechange the medical model. At the moment, the medical model, the same medical model as used by Professor Meadows, is being used. It is the medical model that is severely outdated and severely flawed. It doesn't take into consideration complex and perplexing presentations in terms of genetics or the new identified science data or the rare diseases or syndromes now coming into the world. But most importantly, the medical model focuses on if parents present their children at doctors frequently. If you have a rare disease, or if your child has a rare disease, often it's neurology, urology, cardiology, ophthalmology, audiology. I can go on and on and on and name all the ologies there are out there. Often a child will have 20 or 30 or 40 professionals supporting this child. There are bound to be multiple presentations at various levels throughout their life. That should not be a contributing factor to go, that is FII because somebody's been presented at a doctor or a pediatrician too many times. Another trigger on the medical model is, and I'm sure a lot of parents are going to be going, yes, 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 it is school attendance.
Oh,
School attendance. And that
this is a big one at Sunshine.
And I think it is time, and I can't give the entire medical model in the short span of time, but it is multiple presentations, confusing language or conflicting language, and attendance that are the three main triggers within the SEN system. And I'm not talking about physical abuse, I'm talking about mental abuse or emotional abuse, because doctors or pediatricians will look at that as a trigger for FII. In today's society, in 2022, with the rise in rare diseases and the new pronunciation in looking at the DNA and RNA constructs, what is it that parents are trying to achieve for their children? Doctors, pediatricians, or GPs do not even understand that there is something out there to support rare diseases, or those with complex or perplexing presentations, and that is called the Rare Disease Framework of 2021. It used to be the Rare Disease Strategy or the UK Strategy for Rare Diseases, which was implemented in 2010, 2013, 2018. It is now known as the Rare Disease Framework 2021. If your child has undiagnosed conditions, genetic conditions, or is still in a research participation group to try and find out the genetic or origin or genetic origins of this disease or complexities or perplexions, parents, please, please, please inform your pediatricians and GPs that this document, this legal document exists. Coupled with the FII guidance and the rare disease framework, you can then implement a better working pathway with your pediatricians and GPs. More importantly, which parents need to understand is there's an FII triangle, which is my own work, my own research after years and years and years of perusing document after document, book after book. What are the three components to FII? Or the three constructs on and advising on FII. At the top of that triangle, we have the police. To the left of the triangle, we have the pediatrician or the GP, or both. To the right of that triangle, we have social workers. Social workers are not health or medical professionals. They are solely reliant on the pediatrician and the GP and the police. If the police or if the pediatrician or GP get it wrong, but they still inform social workers, what happens? After 11 years, that is the triangle. What happens when those two groups get it wrong?
I was going to say, Kathy Long has commented in the chat that lots of people have agreed with. It can be that social workers and other similar non-health professionals will just take doctors as right and the medical model as fact. And we know the medical model is not fact, and that doctors are human beings and may not always be right. And it was so interesting what you're saying about rare diseases, because we're living in this world where there's been more technological advances in the last 10 years than there have been in the last 100, comparatively in timescales. So we are existing within a science model which is far advanced. And you know, the medical model of FII and the impact and application that has within the world of health and education, that hasn't caught up, has it really, with our science model? And maybe it never will, because what you were saying earlier about we have to challenge those things, and challenging those things that have existed for, you know, years or whatever, that in itself is you know, can cause suspicion, I guess. So how does that imbalance this world that we're living in now, this science advanced knowledgeable world where we're just absorbing all this information, comparing with the perhaps outdated models with regard to FII, how does that imbalance impact on our education system?
Let's take, for example, EDS, which is Ehlers-Danlos, which is a genetic condition. Not quite, is the research, it's not very clear at the moment, but it is on the lines of genetics, most often hereditary, or even PANDAS, that comes up time and time and time again. And so the medical model, which is still very much flawed and outdated, doesn't take into consideration the science model at all. So the impact on education then, and so you have a child who's got PANDAS, or a child with EDS. The educationalists, GPs, pediatrician, are not experts or specialists to understand or have the basic foundation of these rare diseases or rare syndromes. And oftentimes, the child doesn't feel comfortable within the schooling environment, or they feel they can't go to school, or their rare disease or syndrome prevents them from going to school because they can be ill, or they just need a down day. That leads to the attendance tick or criteria in the outdated model. So again, we have the health that's been outdated, we have the attendance that's been outdated. And so children, young people, find themselves being forced into an educational setting or schooling setting or institution or placement that they can't cope in because of their scientific analysis in terms of genetics or rare diseases, cognitively. Or we have children who fit into the middle model that are neither mainstream or neither specialist. They are what we call double or multiple exceptionalities. And so children then struggle with attending. They don't want to go to school because they don't really fit in. Often children with bowel problems. Nobody wants to go to school when you've got a bowel problem because it's embarrassing. We don't like talking about how often we go to poo or how often we like to wee, or if we've got a stoma. We don't want to do that because as it is, when you go to school, you're bullied sometimes. Or if you have, for example, me, got red hair. I was bullied and hounded for having red hair, but sometimes I didn't want to go to school. What about those children with a rare disease or have a facial deformity, etc., etc., etc.? You don't want to go to school. Attendance then becomes an issue. So if we cast someone back to clustering justice or public health, housing, medical, physical, whether it's LGBTQ or you trans, all of that adds together in not wanting to go to school. It does not equate to not wanting to be educated. There is a difference.
I'm so glad you said that. We've had somebody in the chat ask specifically about home education, elective home education. Does elective home education come under the type of lack of school attendance that can trigger alarm bells in the world of FII with some of these perhaps less informed professionals?
Yes, indeed it does. And as a mother, I had to home educate my child for 5.5 years because there was nothing for my child, and they wanted to force my child into a schooling model that didn't benefit him. He didn't feel comfortable within the schooling environment. And so just by being forced into a situation, you then have to readdress that to stop anxiety and mental health from taking hold, because that's then the additional layer within the public health framework, anxiety, mental health. We all know there's a problem with that currently, not enough resources or support mechanisms. Home education then is a trigger because social workers or education welfare officers think that the child who may have a difficulty or who is presenting with a rare disease or syndrome is missing out on the social aspects of school. And so rather than the social worker or the educational health or care welfare officer focusing on education, they're focusing on solely the social aspect or the schooling aspect. And in this country, I have to say, schooling is not the legal must, only education is. It only becomes, or schooling only becomes a legal must if you sign over your child to the local authority who then takes on the role to educate your child. Home educators are targeted because the children then are deemed that they are not being socialized or that they are not seeing medical professionals enough. Then what happens? So they either not seeing medical professionals enough, or they are then being taken to doctors or medical professionals on too many occasions. This is why the whole medical model around FII is severely flawed and outdated. If we are going to challenge FII, we have to rewrite the entire medical model, which has to include all of the health, all of the complexities, and modernity, modern life. Modern life is technology savvy. Our children are advancing rapidly. the education system hasn't caught on. And for those of you who are into education, the wonderful, beloved, amazing Sir Ken Robinson, he was the fountain of knowledge. Sadly, he's passed away. But I will, on my page or on your page, I can link up his work as well. When will governments and social workers and health professionals understand that society is changing? Not everybody wants to go to school. Why can't we have a differentiated education?
Yeah, and school itself, the model of school, doesn't necessarily fit with our society anyway. I mean, I was working with a family just this week on an EHCP, and this young person is incredibly skilled, IT literate, is essentially running own businesses from the computer. And that's actually okay in terms of a life path. So many of us are working at home nowadays that it's okay to work remotely, it's okay to work behind a screen. Yet there are other professionals involved going, well, he must go into a school to prove that he can go into a school. It's like, but actually his life path is likely to be, very different to that. And actually we need to listen to his views and say in being ready for that world. And why is it the expectation of external professionals on a young person who's 17 years old and perfectly able to self-advocate that that's what they want to do? Why is it this outdated model of schooling and education that then, going all the way back to what we were saying about applying our own experiences to judging a situation, why does school have to be a particular way? And yeah, I couldn't agree more, really. So obviously we talked a little bit about the guidance that's been launched this week from the British Association for Social Workers, and we've touched on it a little bit, and I know we've got the fabulous Kathy Long in the chat, so please, Kathy, delve in to this part of the conversation. But Janet, do you want to share your thoughts on the new guidance and what it will mean to particularly families, because that's who we work with most at Sunshine? What's that guidance going to mean to people, and what's your thoughts on it?
Well, first of all, I have to give my thanks to Kathy and to Dr. Fiona and their colleagues who have produced this guidance. It has been probably about 50 years too late, but we have it now. And I really, really hope that this guidance will give some underpinning and afford social workers some knowledge to remove that bias, or to then have a constructive understanding in their observations or use of language to try and find out what is really wrong, rather than assuming that something is wrong or assuming that there is emotional neglect or harm, etc., etc. It will afford social workers the ability to apply what I would coin or like to coin as common knowledge or common sense. It will afford parents a construct or a piece of tangible paper to say, when you're coming into my home, I'm not going to stop you coming into my home, but when you come into my home, please make sure that you've read this so you can be informed. And when you are informed, you are knowledgeable. That then leads to applying the cost benefit or cost effective analysis, basically meaning that it's going to save time onto the social worker or their department. It's going to save their department money or the government money. But more importantly, it's going to stop the trauma from happening or the damage that's inflicted upon families. Because, only going back to your viewer that mentioned that her daughter now has, pulling a really horrible disease, in terms of cancer, that we want to stop that from happening, because children are unwell, young people are unwell, and you are going to become unwell at times throughout your period of life. You want to be able to go to a trusted professional. This guidance will help with a tangibility to say, social workers, Educationalists, head teachers, please read this first. Senkos, please read this first before you assume that it's FII. It will give them the fountain of knowledge. And, you know, for me, I'm hoping that I can then continue to support the British, all British social workers and global social workers, because my remit is not just the UK, it's global health. And so FII is rising in other areas, in other countries as well. Why? Is it because it's a lack of knowledge? Is it because it's used as a gatekeeping? I don't know. I just think what we first need to do before we challenge the gatekeeping or the ignorance, the medical model is outdated and flawed. It needs to be up to scratch with the scientific model first. And it's looking at it from a forensic point of view, which I'm now doing. It is in the micro details that these cases that are presented in child protection conferences or in the family court, you will find the evidence. But by then, it is too late, because the trauma of going through a family court or a child protection conference is so severe that it is the secondary impact is then mental health crisis. And if you are feeling unwell, that then leads to physical health difficulties. That tangible piece of paper, the guidance that you can hand over and say, use this first to stop the trauma or the impact of false allegations from continuing or happening.
Thank you. I know through working again with some families who I've worked with for a number of months now, actually, that even providing that guidance to professionals almost as a preemptive, you know, knowledge enhancing measure, there are going to be families out there who are very frightened to do even that, because they will be worried that in saying, you know, make sure you read this guidance before you come into my home and try to understand my highly complex, situationally mute, sensory overloaded child. And even that, they may feel, due to their own experience, may be, you know, a red flag to these people coming into their home. Which is incredibly sad, but a very real prospect for a lot of our families, I guess. I think it comes down to, you know, that continued fight to upskill and enhance the knowledge of as many professionals as we can with this guidance, with things like the FII Awareness Week, so that when, you know, FII is countered with all of these types of argument that you have presented tonight, you know, the outdated medical model, etc., that when a parent has the knowledge and tools to say that it is listened to and understood and not counted further against them, if that makes sense. I'm just looking at the time. We've got about sort of 7 minutes. Janet, would you mind if I share a few bits and bobs from our chat? Because we've got some really interesting comments by people and a few questions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks. I have to mention Infinity Far in the chat, who has just today had child protection removed eventually after it was wrongly imposed many times over the last 8 years on their 3 children, and it took all this time to be believed, and today it has been removed. So, you know, what better way to celebrate FII Awareness Week than that piece of news from Infinity Far there. So thank you and congratulations. I know it's a very strange thing to offer congratulations, but after 8 years, you know, you must have really been fighting. So I'm thrilled to read that has happened.
That's fabulous news.
It is absolutely fabulous. We talked about school avoidance, and we actually at Sunshine, we've got we often use the phrase school attendance difficulties rather than refusal, and there's a number of people in the chat offering help to others and just saying, look, if you have got one of these issues, your child can't attend, then think about the language you use when you talk to the professionals who are doing their welfare checks, and rather than saying, you know, feeling ill, refusing to come, use language like that it's a barrier to attendance. I know we work with many families who may not have a rare disease, who may have something that is fairly well known, like ASD or a sensory processing disorder, that because the condition is somewhat invisible compared with, I don't know, if a child fell down the stairs and broke their leg and had to have 6 weeks off school, the approach of the professionals would be incredibly different. It would be school sending cards and videos and gifts from the class. It would be, well, hope you can come back. We're going to all be missing you. But that's a very visible, tangible problem. And when the problem is either less known or it's not visible necessarily, or the child is so adept at masking that the only place that they are comfortable to show that is in the comfort of their own home around people that they love. Why isn't that understood and the empathy provided to that situation? Instead, families just have to deal with accusations and suspicion.
I totally and utterly agree with what you just said, which leads me back to where I opened up, which is Health Principles of 1946. And I urge your viewers to please make yourself aware of the Health Principles of 1946. They were ratified in this country from the World Health Organization and the United Nations together collectively. It is on these health principles of 1946 that the NHS was founded. Public health includes all areas of health. And when we talk about the invisibility, or we can't see that there's something wrong, and I want your viewers to take note that when you take this guidance to your social workers, you need to take it to CAMHS as well. Take it to your mental health professionals. Please be aware that mental health or anxiety is not separate from your physical health. You cannot take your mind elsewhere and leave your body here. You are one construct. Your children are one human construct. Mental health is not separate from physical health. You are one human person. This guidance needs to be implemented to all your CAMHS professionals, your psychiatrists, your psychologists, etc., etc. It needs to be understood. Mental health is not separate from, it is part of all of the health. Only one area of your health, or to be healthy, if it falls down or falls to the ground, all the other cards will fall as well. Which leads me on to, and I know we're running out of time, is that private reports. It's very important. The NHS is struggling at the moment. We are running out of funding with the NHS and timeframes, waiting lists. Private reports are real, constructive documents. They are not bought documents. Private reports are written by professionals equally as the same as NHS professionals. In fact, it could be the same in one another. Your private reports are not bought documents. They are accepted legal documents, and that needs to be remembered, especially for FII. It's important.
Yeah. We have a number of families who come to us saying things like, such and such local authority have told me that they won't accept our report. And we do have essentially one answer to that, which is, in a tribunal context, that's not going to hold up against a judge. A judge will look at the information available to him or her and make the decision accordingly. And one evidence doesn't necessarily supersede another. Just because it's not private or private. And as you said, there's such an overstretch on resources that if I have a very, very desperately unwell child, I'm not going to wait on an NHS pathway for 3 years for diagnosis support if I have the means to, speed up that process privately. And it shouldn't be that I live in fear that will be counted against me, but it is that is precisely what our families are sharing is happening to them, which is precisely why we are so grateful for professionals like you, Janet, and like Luke, who was on the other night, and of course like Kathy and Fiona, all of whom are furnishing our families with the educational knowledge tools to be able to effectively fight back against this injustice. And I really hope, we've had so much engagement in our chat, and I know that there are loads of questions we just haven't been able to get to. So I would recommend two things to our listeners tonight. First thing is get in touch with Sunshine via our inquiries page. So if you're not known to us within the Sunshine family and you've listened tonight and any of this has resonated with you and you want help, you want support, there are so many ways that we can give that to you. And a great way to start is just our initial inquiries call, which is completely free of charge. So please, please get in touch. The more people we can help, the better. We have lots of resources. We can direct you to lots of information, and hopefully give you those tools to be standing up against this injustice. The second thing I'd recommend is that we have a fabulous resource called the Sunshine Academy. And this is where all of our past webinars are stored. They're updated every time we have a new webinar on a topic. So it's all the most up-to-date guidance and information. We've got some really fabulous guest speakers from the worlds of legal, from health, from social care, and we cover some of the topics we've talked about tonight. So we've talked about masking. There's a fabulous webinar on masking. We've talked about things like school attendance difficulties and trauma. Both of those we've got webinars on. So if I know quite a few people actually have been saying, oh, check out the Sunshine webinar on such and such through the chat. I've been reading it, and my Sunshine pride has been really strong. Like, yes, go families, helping each other. Click on our link about Sunshine Academy because it's a wealth of information. So Janet, thank you so much for tonight. I don't know, just to finish off, I don't know if there's anything that you'd like to say in summary, any takeaway for our listeners tonight. If you could tell them one thing, one recommendation, or one piece of encouragement, something that they can take away with them at the end of tonight, what would that be?
I think it is to make sure that you understand the symptoms and you break down the barrier of language. And it's okay not to know all the legal terms or all the medical terms. Just explain yourself, but lose that fear. Because at the end of the day, there is one main expert or one main professional, and that is the parent with the lived nuances day in, day out. Secondly, in a round off, is there's what is called the 7 principles of public life that all health professionals, social workers, public officials need to do or follow. That's look up, go onto Google, go and use Google and look at the 7 principles of public life, or the Nolan principles. You'll find out what your professionals need and must do. And lastly, make sure that your professionals, educationalists are trauma informed, because when they are, they'll be able to treat you with absolute care. And they will fulfill their duties and their duty of candor to protect your health.
Fabulous. Thank you, Janet, so much.
Okay, it's my pleasure.
Oh, well, it's like I said at the beginning, it's such a privilege to have you on tonight. And obviously, I would recommend anyone who's been on this chat tonight to catch up on the other events we've had this week for FII week. Again, Sunshine Pride is strong. I've seen a number of parents with the FII Awareness Week logo as their screen profile picture. That's the word I wanted. So thank you so much for that, and thank you for spreading the word. So with that brings us to the end of our chat tonight. So thank you everyone for joining, for participating. It's been a pleasure, and please do be in touch should you need any further support. So thank you very much. Have a lovely evening. Stay safe, everyone, and speak again very soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.